Aloha y'all, Daniel Aaron here, your guide to vibrant living, and this is a happy birthday video. When I was 16, went on my very first ski trip, and just before I went on my very first ski trip, it was an unusual Christmas time for me with my mother in Virginia, in our little suburban rambler, because my sister Casey very unexpectedly came to visit. I hadn't seen her, I don't know, 5 years maybe. All I knew in that time was, well, she'd had a lot of problems. She'd somewhere in that period had dropped out of school, lived with my father. He'd kicked her out. She'd gotten expelled from a boarding school. She'd moved to California. She was living with my brother. There was some big drama. He kicked her out. She came back. He had to kick her out again. She was in jail. There was some drugs. There were suicide attempts. I knew all of that, and she came to visit. She's 8 years older than me, and so I hadn't lived with her since I was a little kid, and so it was with mixed feelings that she came to visit. On the one hand, I was like, oh, I don't know. And here I am, by the way, 16 years old, fat kid, band kid. I'd kind of find a little bit of my tribe in the band, but I was still fat kid and uncomfortable and shy and kind of depressed. Just, my family was all just so fucked up. I just really wanted to fit in, but that not possible. Anyway, on the flip side though, I was excited because this is my big sister, the closest one to me in age. Even though she's 8 years older, she was the closest one of my 4 siblings in age, and I loved her. And so she came, and it was a little weird. Hadn't seen her in a long time. I knew there was tension with her and Mom. I didn't know exactly why. Anyway, she arrived like just the day after Christmas, I think, and we had a Christmas dinner sort of thing on that day. And then the next day, my mother went off to work, and it was me and my sister at home. And I remember this was in the 80s. I had got, at age 16, maybe I was 15, so excited. I got the Atari video game thing, and it was like the beginning of video games. And I was so excited. My friends had it before me, but still I got it on my own. And so I had set it up, and I was ready to play. My sister woke up, and yeah, okay, Casey's going to play with me. Excellent. She had some coffee. She got her cigarette. She sat down, and we started playing. We were playing hockey, and very rudimentary sort of game, but it's still, we thought it was fun, and I was kind of psyched. I was sitting there in my long john bottoms, with a little waffle knit, and playing the game, and she was sitting beside me, and she had her ashtray on her knee, and she was smoking, but we were playing. She wasn't bad, actually. And as we were in the middle of the game, suddenly I'm like watching the TV over there, playing with the joystick, plastic, and then she stops playing, and I'm like, what's going on? I'm looking over at her. What's she trying to do? I thought she was like punking me, trying to play me. And then I look over, and she's like staring up at the ceiling like this. And I'm like, what's going on? And she goes, did you hear them? I'm like, what are you talking about? I think she's, still thinking she's trying to like psych me out of the game or something. Then I realized, no, she's not. She didn't even know about the game anymore. She's like staring at the ceiling, and her eyes are kind of moving like that. And I'm like, what's going on? And then she says, they're up there. They're up there. They're watching me. I'm like, huh? Casey, what are you talking about? Who's up there? And she just repeats, she's like, they're up there. They're always watching me. And at this point, whew, the hair on the back of my neck stands up, and I'm like, creeped out. And I'm like, what? Nobody's up there, Casey. And I knew we lived in a 1-story house, and up above the ceiling was just a little, not even an attic, a crawl space. And I'm the only one that had ever been up there, and I had gone up there, and I'd put chicken wire on the vents and everything, and nobody's up there. There couldn't be anybody up there. But she was convinced, and I was like, what the hell do I do with this? So I said, no, no, Casey, nobody is up there. Nobody could be up there. So I stood up, and she was just rigid looking up at the ceiling, and I put my hand down. I was like, come on, I'll show you. And I was freaked out, honestly, by this point. Like, what on earth is going on here? What's going on with my sister? And I didn't know what else to do, so I was like thinking I'll use some logic, and so I put my hand down, and I'm just like praying, like, come on. And surprisingly, she put her hand in mine, and she kind of let me pull her up, and it was surprisingly light to pull her up. And I was like, come on, I'll show you, and walked around to where the entrance to the crawl space is, the attic kind of thing, and I was like, look, I'll show you. And we didn't have much money in those days, so the only way to get up there was like a little, square in the ceiling. We couldn't afford one of those fancy ladders that accordions down, so the washing machine was near enough by, and if I put a stool on top of that, I could climb on the washing machine and then climb on the stool and then pull myself up. And even though I was pudgy, I could just get myself up there. So I did that, and before I got up there, I had her hand me I handed her the flashlight. She gave me the flashlight, and so I'm standing there on the stool and taking the flashlight, and I'm looking around, up in the attic, like I'm above the ceiling at this point, and I'm like, no, nobody up here. She's like, they're up here, I'm like, so then I actually get all the way up and look around, move around. I'm like, no, and I'm like, Casey is looking down now, like, no way, nobody could be up there. And then she looked up at me, and she's like, they heard you and they got out. And I thought to myself, like, whoa. And she just walked away. And I was still up there. I'm like, hey, hold the stool. Come on, I need to get down. Anyway, I figured out how to get down. And there's more to the story, as you can imagine. And the reason I'm telling you this story right now is it's just about my sister's birthday. November 28th is the day she was born. And it's been, what am I now, 53 years old. It's been like about 30 years since the time when she actually succeeded in killing herself. And that was my first real brush with her psychosis, her paranoid schizophrenia, how much of that was a result of her addiction to meth, how much of the meth was a result of her unresolved emotional and psychological, spiritual issues. These are questions that are good and addressed for another time. The reason I'm telling you all this, though, is one, because one of the ways I honor my sister is by doing my best to, one, understand how to thrive in the human experience. And it's not always easy. It certainly isn't easy for a lot of people. There are a lot of challenges being trapped, a great huge spirit in a little body. And two, by doing my best to share and help others, to serve people to have greater and greater quality of life, to thrive, not just get by. So one of my teachers once got up on stage and he said, this morning, no, how do I put it? Let me rephrase. When I was 12 years old, I found my mother hanging by a rope in the garage. This morning, I had breakfast of granola and some orange juice and a piece of peanut butter toast. And he said that just like out of the blue, like these two things really juxtaposed, and everyone's like, what are you doing? What is this crazy? And what he said about it was, when we can talk about our past, without emotion, when we can talk about it in the same way we talk about what we had for breakfast, then we know we've had healing. And for me, it's been 30 years, and I don't often say lightly in conversation, hey, my sister killed herself, because it can be really triggering for people. And of course, people say, oh, I'm so sorry. And, and I appreciate that. And you can tell from the way I'm sharing this with you, I could still tap into the sadness of having lost my sister. And on some level, the tragedy of her not having the resources, the ability to heal and learn how to thrive in the midst of the pain that she encountered. And I'm really grateful to her because she helped spark me to say, wait a minute, I need to heal and I need to dedicate myself to something else. So I hope you will join me in honoring everyone who didn't find their way, who didn't heal, and in dedicating ourselves to healing, thriving, and serving. All right, y'all. Thanks for tuning in. Aloha.